Well, let's further analyze this with Ruse Moleshe, who's an energy expert, and she joins me this afternoon as we continue shedding light on the country's electricity crisis. Ruse, thank you so much. A pleasure having you right here on eNCA. Well, we heard the Energy Action Plan, or at least the status of it, from Minister Ramokgopa. He said he can't promise a date in terms of when exactly load shedding will end, but he says that they're currently improving energy availability factory. What do you make of the Minister's presentation today?
Good afternoon, Tumelo, as well as the viewers. This afternoon, the Minister was basically indicating to us that there's some improvements with respect to Eskom's performance, as they seem to be concentrating on the coal-fired power fleet to make sure that there's more availability than used to be the case, and that the plants, that the units that are performing at relatively less than they should be, perform at full capacity. So they seem to have all hands on deck as far as Eskom is concerned. I think this is in line with what the board had said when they came in, that they would like to increase the energy availability factor to make sure that there's relatively less load shedding.
In those efforts, of course, in trying to ensure that there's no load shedding, the minister did, mention that they are registering anyone or people or individuals that are responsible for sabotage, saying they're bringing them before the courts. Obviously, with improvements that they're making, they can't deny the fact that sabotage is still a hindrance. How do you take the handling? I mean, how do you gauge, the minister's handling of this sabotage?
I think that the minister, if I heard him correctly, is focusing mainly on the technical issues, the skills issues, through Eskom, of course, because Eskom is its own independent board, supporting Eskom, let me rather say that, to focus on the technical issues. The sabotage issues, obviously there's a task team that is working on that, and he promised to bring them along. But most of what he was focusing on was with respect to technical performance, because I think in the past, we have tended to focus more on the sabotage and neglected a little bit on turning around things with respect to the technical aspects. The minister was at pains to indicate that they are also trying their best now to make sure that there's room for them to do maintenance, because he understands that if they focus on the short term right now and there is no maintenance that happens, these issues of breakdowns that are unplanned may still continue to be a problem. So he did allude to the fact that there has been obviously theft, corruption and all other things, which I think the next session will have a briefing in detail on those issues. Absolutely. But I like the fact that they are so methodical in focusing on the technical issues.
Yeah, he further mentioned that a briefing on security will be underway to detail some of those aspects, as you mentioned, but also coming to, I suppose, an area which is vulnerable, or at least remaining vulnerable. The minister made mention of transmission, saying that renewable energy is still quite a challenge.
Yes, so the minister is saying basically what most analysts have been saying in the past, that for us to have reliable supply in South Africa, excuse me, we cannot do without the Eskom supply and improving the Eskom power plants. Obviously, there's renewable energy capacity that will also come in, which will mean that we even more important for us to have reliability in the system. As you know, he was mentioning that there's intermittency, which comes with renewable energy supply. So we're going to have flexible supply in the system as well to be able to deal with that issue. He mentioned the country, China, having added a lot of capacity, renewable energy capacity, but still continuing to provide, to make sure that they develop coal-fired power fleet, so that they have baseload capacity. He mentioned Korea, South Korea, which warned South Africa to not, to make sure that we are cautious about how much renewable energy can be managed in the grid, and that it's balanced by other capacity.
Right. When we also look at the winter season right here in South Africa, the minister also making mention that demand seemingly having dipped below winter, base case scenario. What is that telling us about the demand and its supply just during this winter season?
He attributed the demand mainly to savings, but I think that there's also a little bit to do with the weather, to be honest. You can't all attribute that to the fact that the minister has been asking people to save. So, but the good thing about that demand being relatively low is that we are now seeing is contributing to the lower load shedding that we are seeing, and it's giving them room to be able to do maintenance, which they was not envisaged. They were expecting somewhere a peak of around 34,000 megawatts, and we are now sitting far below that. So that is also contributing, besides the supply side interventions that ESCOM is making, the demand reduction is contributing a lot to where we are today with respect to load shedding.
Yeah. Also, in terms of that comparison between 2021 and 2022, he made mention that we had 75 days of load shedding in 2021. We had about 205 days, he mentioned, of load shedding in 2022. And he says unless we do something dramatic, we might just surpass that number this year.
Yes, unfortunately, this year we've also performed dismally. And this is why it's encouraging to see now that that energy availability factor has reached 60%, as it was around 48%. But we need to be cautious. As I mentioned, some of it could be attributed to the demand that has been reduced quite significantly this winter. Hopefully, we don't see much more extreme weather, because that could change the situation. But yeah, that he mentioned. The other thing that he mentioned, which is important, is a grid capacity, increasing the transmission infrastructure to be able to cater for adding new capacity, particularly the renewable energy capacity that is expected to be added and where there are constraints in the system. And he mentioned an interesting development in that they are looking to the private sector to help them with those kind of projects without taking away ESCOM's responsibility as a system operator to be able to deal with the system. So that's an interesting area as well, because there is really a constraint when it comes to the connection, the grid.
All right, we'll leave our conversation there. Ruse, thank you so much for speaking to us. Ruse Moleshe, energy expert at the back of Minister Hossein Suramokgopa, bringing that energy action plan presentation today, further saying that, of course, one that will deal with security, a briefing on security at ESCOM will be details. But as it stands, of course, we are seeing progress in terms of maintaining and of course the capacity, and he hopes that we'll continue to do so. So that we'll see that number of days with load shedding exceeding that of 2022.